Hello and welcome to World Talks on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. Rarely has there been more geopolitical uncertainty around the world, from energy needs to regional conflict and technology to international politics. Challenges to the world order are being raised daily. On the 1st of January this year, Poland took over at the helm of the EU Council. Where will it focus the attention of the EU? Well, the presidential candidate of Poland's main ruling party, Rafał Trzaskowski, has said that the EU will place greater priority on security, adding that Warsaw itself should allocate 5% of its GDP to defence starting next year. What else should Poland influence during its tenure? Well, to discuss this, I'm joined by Piotr Kaczyński, an EU expert at the Geremik Foundation and a regular contributor. Welcome, Piotr, back to TVP World. Good to have you.
Good to be back.
So Poland has been president of the Council of the EU for coming up to 1 month now?
Yeah, that's about 17%.
About 17% of its tenure. So what has been achieved so far? What general trends can we see starting?
Look, what has been achieved, it's too early to say because, programming of the EU takes years and months ahead. So to say what have you achieved within, let's say, 30 days or not even 30 days.
But it's a very short time period, 6 months, right?
So it's very important what's on the agenda.
You're right.
And what's on the agenda. For example, this week we have seen that, our recent days, that the sanctions against Russia have been reimposed, which is very important message after last semester where Hungary was blocking it. Of course, this is Foreign Affairs Council, this is not Polish presidency's doing, but this is definitely the Council doing and EU doing.
Okay, so what is Poland going to be focused on in its role as president of the Council?
Look, we've seen a lot of theater out there, right? Opening of the presidency. But the true meaning of what's coming up outside of, let's say, security issues such as contingency plans, something's going on in Syria or Middle East or Congo, then you need to take care of that as well. But what's on the agenda, that's going to start pretty much in February. We have seen for now President Trump unveiling what he wants to do with Europe as well in terms of Greenland. This is definitely one of those big topics that Denmark will take to the Council at some point. But also we will see what will be the economic relations between the US and the EU.
Right. I want to come back to that in just a second. But you mentioned security. Now, only a couple of days ago, within the last 2 days, a Bulgarian tanker has been stopped in the Baltic Sea, and it's being accused of cutting undersea cables, disrupting communications in the region, between countries in the region. Now, what influence can Poland have in its role as president on that type of security?
Absolutely, it can, depending, of course, on the motion where those things are addressed. But they have to be addressed by the EU in terms of what should be done. So something called orientation discussion should take place, and it will take place probably under Foreign Affairs Council, but so still Kaja Kallas, but it doesn't matter because there will be discussions within the Council, but there are working parties, different chairs, different places, and some of them are chaired by Poles, some of them are chaired by people coming from External Action Service. So it's not an issue if it's Poland or not Poland.
Right.
The issue is whether this is addressed. And the biggest question out there is how to secure Baltic right now with the infrastructure.
Okay, fine. Well, we should be watching, obviously, how that is done. The other thing, I just read a quote from Mr. Trzaskowski, who talked about other countries in the EU actually contributing more to NATO, to defence, and he's calling for 5% by next year. How do you think that's going to go down amongst EU member states?
That's not a big issue for the EU and the presidency of the Council of the EU. Maybe something towards the second half half of the presidency when the discussions on the next multi-annual budget will begin, because there is this idea, or two ideas. One of them is that there should be a bigger, or effectively at all, an EU defense budget out there within the main budget. The main budget right now, it's about agriculture, cohesion funds, not for defense issues. So maybe maybe it's going to be there, but the first talks about it will be in, let's say, in May and June, towards the end of the presidency. Another issue is what Mr. Kubilius has presented last year, which is a new fund on defense, and that is something that should be addressed within the General Affairs Council, presided by Poles.
So you're talking about these defense decisions actually being made by the EU rather than by independent countries individually?
I'm talking about what the EU can do, because then what individual countries do within their budgets, it's a separate issue. And here, for example, Poland already spends almost 5% of its GDP, more than the United States. So this is definitely on the leading by example, if you like. But this is a different discussion. However, there's another room for maneuver for the presidency as well. That is, Poland tried last year and as well, and failed on the account of whether you can discount the defense spendings within your deficit. And the Commission said no to this in 2024. We'll see whether this debate will return, because if you spend more on defense, we've seen the German debate, for example, where Constitutional Tribunal also shut down the Scholz government attempts to spend much more on defense, because you have to balance your budget. So those discussions are definitely on the table.
Okay, so budgetary issues. Now, talking about budgetary issues, the economy and so on, Trump's tariffs. Talk to me about the impact of those on the European Union.
That is something that is definitely coming. We don't know exactly the time and frame of it. We don't know what exactly the US president will announce and when, but clearly Europeans have been already preparing for it. And there's so much going on between EU and US in terms of trade. This is the biggest, transatlantic trade is the biggest trade out there in the world, including China. We are trading much more between US and EU than with the Chinese, each of us individually. So this is massive on both accounts. Just to give you two facts that are not widely known, that EU is the biggest market for Tesla, and it is the biggest market for iPhones. So those two massive, big American producers out there, including Mr. Musk company, are pretty much, it's very important for them what's going on in this economy as well.
Right, but now Trump has been saying, well, you know, Europe isn't buying enough American goods. He's talking about, for example, the car industry. Leave Tesla aside for a second. But do you get the impression that if some kind of arrangements were made where there was more trade coming in this direction towards Europe, that the tariffs would actually start to fade away as a threat?
That's possible. I mean, Ursula von der Leyen already announced a couple of weeks ago that she is ready, or Europe is ready, to buy more American gas, for example, so that because the biggest issue out there for President Trump and his administration is probably, outside of the rhetorics, is the balance sheet. There's a huge deficit on the American side, and he wants to balance it out a little bit, or at least to zero, ideally, or even a surplus from the US perspective. And one of the biggest countries out there that has a surplus is Italy. So this is interesting, because Giorgia Meloni is the one that is the bridge between the transatlantic, right?
Right. Yeah, so again, quite an interesting dynamic there. We're watching that carefully. Now, staying with Trump and his rhetoric on taking over Greenland, tell us where the EU stands, what it can do about this, and how you expect things to play out.
EU does not stand on Greenland. It's taken definitely a very backstage on that matter, and a lot of people have been critical about the Commission in particular on this issue. And I think it's.
So you're saying they should take a bigger
I'm saying
position.
that people are saying that they should take a bigger position. I'm trying to understand why the Commission didn't take it. And my point is that they probably didn't want to alienate Trump further. And the biggest risk out there, which seems to be going a little bit away, is that America would divide and rule in Europe, like divide countries between themselves. So it wouldn't be manageable at all. But the Polish presidency in the Council, the European Commission is out there preparing a European response. So whether Americans are kind of blocking this European response from emerging or not, that is probably going away, which is a good thing. And we simply can have a discussion. There is a lot going on also in Germany, especially in the context of elections. And the most likely scenario, the next chancellor is laying out all his pro-American, all his transatlantic good feelings out there. So probably also the Americans will wait until the German elections are called.
Okay, so again, something to keep an eye on. Now, Donald Trump has already started on his deportation of migrants, and illegal migrants into the United States is not something unique to that country. Europe has been suffering from this for years now, from the south of Europe to the eastern border of the EU. Are there lessons that the EU can learn from President Trump in this regard?
Look, the global debate on migration has been taking place on a lot of issues, including migration issues. And this one here, of course, Europeans are watching what Americans are doing, but also what kind of criticism is there. For example, President Trump ordered that 1,500 people be arrested daily. It's like, shouldn't you have you shouldn't have a quota how many people should be arrested a day. It should be done who is there, let's say, illegally or not. So that's one issue, for example. Europeans have been trying to have camps outside of Europe, for example, Italians with Albania or Tunisia.
And UK with Rwanda?
UK, but it's outside of the EU. But yes, but the principle is there.
Yeah.
UK and Rwanda. So we are clearly watching each other on what we are doing. But interestingly, Portuguese are preparing to get the Portuguese illegal migrants in the US. Poland is preparing to get the Poles who are illegally in the US. So there's two angles to this.
There are certainly two angles. Well, I'd love to continue this conversation. Unfortunately, Mr. Kaczyński, we have to end it there.
Absolutely.
The clock has beaten us. Thank you once again for joining us and sharing your analysis. Have a good day. And that's all from this episode of World Talks. Goodbye.